The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but Daniel had already been awake for over an hour, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, pected, dreading the moment he'd have to swing his legs over and face the day. The house was silent for now, an eerie kind of quiet that felt more like a pause before a storm than peace. 7 kids under one roof could never mean peace. He ran a hand over his face, his beard rough from neglect, and finally sat up. His wife, Natalie, had passed away just 4 months ago, and every day since had felt like a new test he was failing. The house, once so warm and full of laughter, was now a battleground of chaos and clutter. Backpacks were tossed in corners, laundry piled like soft hills in every room, and the kitchen. Oh, the kitchen was a graveyard of cereal boxes, sticky spoons, and empty milk cartons. Daniel tried to hold it together. He really did, pected. But after a full shift at the fire station, he came home to more fires he couldn't put out, emotional meltdowns, sibling fights, forgotten homework, and the nightly puzzle of dinner. Today was no different. He shuffled downstairs to find 4-year-old Ellie sitting on the floor, her hair tangled and her face sticky with jam, spooning peanut butter directly from the jar. Across the room, 14-year-old Emma scrolled through her phone, earbuds in, ignoring the 2 younger boys, Ben and Lucas, who were wrestling on the couch. The twins, Mia and Max, were nowhere to be seen, which was never a good sign. And 2-year-old Noah had somehow managed to smear yogurt all over his high chair and was now attempting to climb out of it. All right, troops, Daniel said, clapping his hands. Everyone freeze. No one froze. Ben Lucas, off the couch. Emma, please take those out and help Ellie find clean clothes. No, buddy. Please sit down before you fall and break your skull. Not my job, Emma muttered, not looking up. Daniel exhaled through his nose and ran a hand through his messy brown hair. This wasn't working. None of it was. He didn't have time to cook, let alone manage the moods of 7 grieving children. Breakfast was a disaster every morning, pected. Lunchboxes were packed with whatever he could find in 5 minutes, and dinner. Dinner had become an afterthought, often nothing more than frozen nuggets and tears. After dropping the older kids at school, late again, Daniel drove back in silence, passing the park where he and Natalie used to take the kids, the one with the creaky swings and the shaded bench, where she'd sit with Noah in her lap. His chest tightened. The grief still hit him in random waves, during traffic lights while folding socks, or hearing a song she used to hum while cooking. She was the glue. Without her, everything had come apart. When he returned home, his neighbor, Cranston, stood at the gate holding a Tupperware of banana bread. Daniel, she said gently, eyes kind behind her glasses. You look tired. Feel worse than I look, he said with a half-hearted chuckle, accepting the bread. I know it's not my place, but I've been meaning to say, there's a woman I know. Her name's Mara. She's a widow too. Lost her husband a few years ago. Used to work at a cafe, but she's been keeping to herself. She cooks like an angel. I think she could help. Help. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Cook. Maybe just a few meals a week. You've got a lot on your plate. He hesitated. The idea of letting a stranger into the chaos was unnerving, but he also couldn't deny the exhaustion clawing at his bones. Can I think about it? Of course. But don't wait too long, dear, pecked. You need more than banana bread to get through this. That night, after another dinner of cold pizza and juice boxes, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, long after the kids had gone to bed, staring at the banana bread wrapped in foil. He thought of Natalie. How she used to sing to the kids while she cooked. How the house smelled like garlic and thyme, like cinnamon rolls on Sundays. Now it smelled like sour milk and detergent. He didn't cry often, there wasn't time, but that night he did. The next morning he called Mara. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice low and cautious. Hello. My name is Daniel Hart. I got your number from Mrs. Cranston. She said you might help with meals. I was a long pause. I don't do catering. Mara said carefully. I'm not asking for catering. Just someone to cook a few dinners a week. I have 7 kids. I'm a firefighter. My wife died a few months ago. I'm drowning. Silence again. Then a soft sigh. I'll come by tomorrow. But I'm not a babysitter. I'm not asking you to be. When she arrived the next day, Daniel didn't know what he expected. Mara was in her late 30s, with deep auburn hair tied back loosely, and eyes that held a kind of calm sorrow. She wore a plain sweater and jeans, and held a canvas tote filled with ingredients. This isn't a commitment, she said, stepping into the chaotic house. I'm just cooking. That's all. Fair, Daniel said. The children eyed her warily. Noah clung to Daniel's leg. Emma rolled her eyes. The twins peeked from the hallway, whispering. Mara said nothing to them at first. She went straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge, made a small noise of disapproval, and set to work. And then something strange happened. Within 30 minutes, the house started to smell different. Garlic, onions, rosemary, real food. The kind of food Daniel hadn't tasted since Natalie's funeral. The kids began to hover. Even Emma came into the kitchen, sniffing the air. What's that? She asked. Chicken stew, Mara replied. You cook like my mom did. Mara looked up, her expression unreadable. I cook like someone who's loved and lost. Now go wash your hands. Dinner that night was silent at first. The kids stared at their bowls as if unsure it was real. But after the first few bites, something shifted. The twins giggled. Noah made happy little sounds. Even Ben, usually quiet, asked for seconds. Daniel watched it all in awe. Thank you, he said to Mara as she packed up her bag. I'll be back Thursday, she said. Don't expect miracles. It's just food. But Daniel, sitting in the now quiet kitchen with a warm bowl in his hands, already felt the miracle beginning. And for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like it was falling apart. It felt, barely, quietly, like a home again. By the time Thursday came around, the children were already asking when the food lady would come back. It had only been one meal, one evening of warmth, but that single night had begun to shift something deep in the house. Daniel noticed it in small things, how Maya and Max actually helped clear the table the next morning, or how Noah reached for a spoon instead of his usual messy fingers. It was subtle, barely visible, but it was real. When Mara returned, she brought fresh produce, a few glass jars of spices, and her own calm presence. Daniel greeted her at the door, clearly more relieved than he let on. You weren't sure I'd come back, were you? She asked, her voice half teasing. He gave a tired laugh. Let's say I was cautiously hopeful. She didn't smile, not really, but something softened in her eyes. As she walked toward the kitchen. Old Noah trailed behind her like a duckling, and Daniel watched with quiet astonishment. Mara moved in the kitchen like she belonged there. Not imposing, not overfamiliar, just quietly competent. She tied on her apron, washed her hands, and began chopping vegetables. The kitchen, long dormant of joy, seemed to breathe again with the scents she conjured: rosemary, tomato, a hint of lemon zest. Over the next hour, the home's transformation deepened. Ben and Lucas hovered, drawn by the scent of roasting chicken and the sizzle of garlic and oil. Emma appeared, pretending to be uninterested but clearly watching. When Mara noticed, she spoke without looking up. Want to learn how to make mashed potatoes from scratch? Emma blinked. Like, with real potatoes, as opposed to imaginary ones. Yes. That earned a smirk, and Emma stepped forward cautiously. Daniel, peering in from the hallway, was almost afraid to breathe, worried the spell might break. Over time, Thursday dinners became a rhythm. A heartbeat the house hadn't had since Natalie died. Mara came with recipes and soft music playing from her phone. She never intruded, never asked personal questions, but the kids started offering pieces of themselves anyway. Maya showed Mara a picture she'd drawn at school. Max talked about a bug collection he was starting. Ben admitted he liked books more than soccer. Mara always listened. not with exaggerated praise, but with quiet attention that made each child feel heard. One night, as Daniel carried dishes to the sink, he asked, "Why do you do this?" "Cook for strangers. You don't seem like someone who wants to be around people." Mara was rinsing herbs under cool water. "I didn't say I wanted to be. But sometimes grief recognizes grief. And feeding someone, it's the only way I know to help." Daniel nodded slowly, the truth of her words settling between them. He learned bits about her too, not through her words but through the food. Her lemon chicken had a brightness that didn't match her otherwise muted presence. Her mushroom risotto was slow and careful, like someone trying not to stir too fast, not to disturb something buried. Her cinnamon rolls, the kind she only made on weekends, were soft and warm, and left a lingering sweetness that reminded Daniel of Sundays with Natalie. One evening, a particularly difficult one, when Lucas had come home in tears after a school bully called their family the orphan house, Mara made shepherd's pie and a small apple tart. Pected. She didn't ask what happened. She just served the food, poured hot cocoa, and handed Lucas an extra scoop of tart with whipped cream. That night, the kids didn't cry themselves to sleep. Daniel stood at the doorway watching them, his heart full and aching. Mara caught his gaze and gave a single nod. No words were spoken, but everything necessary was understood. A month passed, then two. Mara began to come not just on Thursdays, but Mondays and Fridays too. Eventually, she was around for Sunday dinners, where everyone dressed just a little nicer, where the food was placed on the table in serving dishes instead of on paper plates. One Sunday afternoon, Mara arrived with a basket of bread she had baked herself. The twins raced to the door, and Noah squealed with joy. Daniel was in the living room trying to fix a broken lamp when he heard it, laughter. Real, genuine, echoing through the hallway. He stood there, pected, holding a screwdriver and blinking against the sting in his eyes. It had been months since he'd heard that sound. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, Mara stayed to wash the dishes. Daniel tried to protest, but she waved him off. "I find peace in the small things," she said, rinsing plates with methodical grace. "Cleaning helps me think." Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her. "You remind me of Natalie. Not in how you look or sound, but in how you make things feel okay just by being here." Mara didn't respond immediately. She set a plate in the drying rack and dried her hands on a towel. "I used to cook for my husband like this," she said finally. "We didn't have kids. Couldn't. But every night, I'd try something new. Even if the day was awful, dinner meant we survived it together." Daniel nodded, understanding all too well. "I don't think I'm healing them, Mara," he said. "I think you are, one meal at a time." She didn't answer. Instead, she placed the last dish in the rack, turned off the faucet, and stood there a moment, eyes closed. And for a flicker of time, the kitchen held more than silence. It held memory. It held two people who had lost almost everything, and yet were still here, still breathing, still standing. And that, Mara thought, was something close to a miracle. When she left that night, Daniel walked her to her car. The air was crisp, the stars sharp and cold. They stood beside her small sedan, neither speaking. Finally, Daniel said, "Do you ever wish you could go back? Before everything?" "Every day," she said. "Me too." She looked up at him then, her face illuminated by the porch light, and for the first time, he saw the depth in her gaze, not just sorrow but strength. And he realized then that healing wasn't loud or sudden, it was this. Quiet, steady. "See you Monday," she said. He nodded. "Can't wait." As her car disappeared down the road, Daniel stood in the driveway a little longer, arms crossed against the cold. The house behind him was quiet but no longer heavy. Inside were 7 kids, full of food and warmth and maybe, just maybe, a little more hope than the day before. And at the heart of it, a woman who'd promised she was just here to cook, but who was slowly, surely, restoring everything they thought they had lost. Autumn arrived with a rush of cold wind and golden leaves tumbling across the lawn. The children were deep into their school routines, their backpacks heavier, their stories longer. Each evening, the house stirred with life. Homework was done at the kitchen table under warm lights, and dinner, real homemade, pected, steaming dinner, had become not just a necessity but a sacred time. It was no longer surprising to hear laughter echoing down the hallways, or to find Noah curled up on the couch, belly full, peacefully asleep before bedtime. Mara was now part of their rhythm. She moved through the house with quiet grace, never demanding attention but always commanding it in her subtle way. She learned which twin hated onions, which child preferred apples peeled, and which days Daniel's silence meant he'd had a hard shift at the station. She didn't ask questions, didn't dig into the wounds each of them carried. She didn't need to. Grief had its own language, and Mara spoke it fluently through her cooking. Daniel had stopped referring to her as the cook when talking to friends. He didn't have a word that fit. She wasn't staff, she wasn't family. But she was essential. When she didn't come for a scheduled day, once because of a cold, once because of a funeral for a distant cousin, there was a quiet, visible void. The children moped. Daniel felt restless. Then came the night of the storm. It began as a drizzle, the soft pattering on the windows as Mara stirred a pot of lentil soup. The lights flickered once, then again. Outside, the wind howled louder, trees swaying like dancers in a violent ballet. Daniel had just arrived home, drenched from the rain when the power went out completely. The kids squealed. Noah started crying. Emma immediately complained that her phone was going to die. Daniel lit candles and pulled out flashlights, but it was Mara who brought calm. She found the small camp stove Daniel had forgotten about in the garage, and within minutes, she had it running on the back porch under the overhang. She worked there, rain spitting sideways, sleeves rolled, cooking by lantern light, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When the soup was ready, they gathered in the living room. Blankets, candles, bowls passed hand to hand. Ben read a book out loud, while Mara made hot chocolate over a small flame. Daniel watched from the edge of the room, something inside him loosening. For the first time in months, they looked like a family again. Not broken. Not mourning, just together. That night, after the kids had been tucked into makeshift nests of sleeping bags and pillows, Daniel offered to drive Mara home. The storm had quieted but left behind slick streets and downed branches. In the car, they sat in companionable silence. Mara stared out the window, fingers curled around the cup of tea he'd poured into a travel mug. "You did well tonight," Daniel said finally. "I'm good in emergencies," she replied. "You always this calm?" "Not always. Just when it counts." He glanced over at her, noticing the way her profile looked in the dim dashboard light. Tired but composed. There was something about her presence that made even the hardest moments manageable. "I don't say this enough," he began. "But thank you. For all of it. I don't think we'd be okay without you." Mara didn't answer right away. She just sipped her tea. Then she said softly, "You would have been okay. Maybe not this soon. Maybe not in the same way. But you would have gotten there." But Daniel shook his head. "I don't know. Before you came, I felt like I was drowning. I still do sometimes, But then you walk in with your bags of groceries and your quiet confidence, and suddenly the air feels clearer." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound heroic. It is. You brought this house back to life." Mara looked out the window again, her voice lower now. "I needed this too. After Tom died, I stopped cooking for months. Couldn't even look at the stove. It felt pointless, all that love and effort for someone who wasn't there to eat it. It broke me. I didn't just lose him, I lost the part of myself that knew how to care." Daniel said nothing. He knew that kind of loss. He knew it deeply. She continued, "Mrs. Cranston kept asking me to help you. I ignored her for weeks. Then one day I thought, what if feeding someone else could feed a part of me too?" They pulled up in front of her small cottage. The porch light flickered on. illuminating the rain-speckled windows. "I'm glad you did," Daniel said. Mara unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to him. "You've got good kids. And you're a good father. Even when you don't think you are." The words landed like a balm. Daniel opened his mouth to respond but stopped, pecked. There was a weight in his chest he didn't know how to name. He nodded. She stepped out into the cool night, gave him a brief wave, and walked to her door. Daniel waited until she was safely inside before driving off. That week, things shifted again. It wasn't obvious, but it was real. The kids began setting the table without being asked. Emma helped Mara prep vegetables, pecked. Lucas asked if Mara could come to his parent-teacher night. Daniel caught himself humming while folding laundry. Then one evening, Mara brought a scrapbook. "I found this in a box," she explained. "It's just old recipes, pictures, notes. I thought the kids might enjoy it." They did more than enjoy it. They pored over it. Max wanted to make the chocolate cake on page 14. Mia was fascinated by Mara's notes in the margins. "Tom loved this," or "Too much salt last time, pecked. Try sea salt." Emma lingered on a photo of Mara and her late husband in front of a Christmas tree, smiling at each other with such love it hurt. "Do you miss him every day?" Emma asked quietly. Mara nodded. "Some days the missing feels like breathing." Emma nodded too. "That's how I feel about my mom." And just like that, a bridge was built. Later that night, as Daniel helped Mara carry out her bags, he paused at the door. "Emma talks to you more than she talks to me." "She doesn't need you to fix her grief," Mara said. "She just needs to know someone understands it." Daniel nodded slowly. "Do you ever feel like maybe this was supposed to happen? Not the losing them, I mean, but us meeting like this?" Mara's eyes searched his. "I don't know if I believe in supposed to, but I believe in timing, and healing, and second chances." Daniel stepped a little closer. "And do you think we get those?" She didn't back away. "Sometimes," pecked. "If we're brave enough to accept them." The porch light flickered above them. Somewhere inside, one of the twins giggled in their sleep. The world was quiet. Full. Waiting in that unspoken space between them, something tender bloomed. They didn't kiss, they didn't even touch. But they stood there, two broken people held together by shared silence, and the scent of warm bread lingering in the air. It wasn't love yet, but it was something close, and it was real. Thanksgiving came early that year. The last week of November bringing an unexpected chill, and the first dusting of snow that clung to the rooftops like powdered sugar. The Hart household was buzzing with anticipation, an unfamiliar but welcome energy rippling through the halls. For the first time in months, maybe longer, there was something to look forward to. Mara had started preparations days ahead. She planned a feast not just out of tradition, but out of care. Each dish was chosen with intention. Emma's favorite cranberry, orange relish, Max's request for honey-glazed carrots, and a double batch of dinner rolls, because the twins had started sneaking them before meals. Daniel had taken the day off work. He hadn't done that in years, always opting to work holidays and give others the time. But this year was different. This year he wanted to be home. On the morning of Thanksgiving, the kitchen was already warm by dawn. Mara was there early, her hands steady, her heart a little anxious. This was more than just a meal. This was something sacred. Daniel met her at the door with a coffee in hand. Offered silently but gratefully received. "You don't have to do all of this," he said. Mara gave him a look that said, "You know better by now." The kids took their jobs seriously. Emma helped with the pie crusts, rolling them out under Mara's watchful eye. Ben set the table with the good dishes, pecked, the ones still in boxes since Natalie passed. Lucas made place cards with crayon drawings of turkeys and pumpkins, pecked. Maya and Max took turns stirring the gravy, while Noah toddled around in a sweater vest 2 sizes too big, trailing laughter behind him like a scarf. The house, once broken by silence and sorrow, hummed with life. By the time guests began to arrive, neighbors, friends, a few coworkers from the fire station. The air was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon. Mara didn't usually stay when company came. She always cleaned up and slipped out quietly, letting Daniel take the spotlight. But this time was different. Daniel had insisted. "You've cooked every meal that got us here," he told her. "You deserve to sit at this table with us." She had hesitated. "I'm not family." "You are," he said simply. And that was that. When the meal was ready, Daniel stood at the head of the table. Carving knife in hand, emotion thick in his voice. "I'm not great with words," he began, "but I want to say thank you. To my kids for holding on, to our friends for showing up, and especially to Mara, for giving us more than meals. For giving us back our home." There was a moment of silence, broken only by the sound of a chair leg scraping as Emma got up, walked around the table, pecked, and hugged Mara tightly. One by one, the others followed. Even Noah, who didn't fully understand the moment, wrapped his little arms around her knees, pecked. And Mara, caught off guard, found herself blinking back tears. They ate and laughed and shared stories, some about Natalie, some about school, and some simply about life. Mara found herself seated beside Daniel, their elbows brushing occasionally, their eyes meeting in small, warm glances. There was no rush, no fear, only quiet understanding. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the frosted windows, Mara stepped out onto the porch for air. Daniel followed a few minutes later, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, breathing in the cold. "I didn't know I needed this. I thought I was here to help you heal. But you, this family, you've helped me too." He handed her a mug. "You belong here, at the table, in this house. With us." Mara looked down at the cup, then up at him. "You really believe that?" He didn't answer with words. He took a step closer, slowly, deliberately, and brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. Then he kissed her. Soft, sure, unhurried. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't fireworks, expected. It was something better, safe, steady, and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "I thought you weren't ready," she whispered. "I wasn't," he said, "until I met you." They stayed out there a long time, leaning against the porch railing, watching the sky grow darker. The stars blink into view. Inside, the children played games and built blanket forts, the smell of pumpkin pie lingering in the air. From that night on, Mara stayed longer. She came for dinners, yes, but also movie nights, rainy afternoons, and morning pancakes. The kids started calling her Mimi, a name Noah blurted out one day and everyone adopted. Her name found its place on the school contact lists, pecked, on the chore charts, and in the small moments that made up their days. One Sunday morning months later, Daniel walked into the kitchen to find Mara in her robe, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. He wrapped his arms around her waist, kissed her shoulder, and whispered, "Marry me." She laughed. "You're supposed to ask, not command." "I'm serious," he said, turning her to face him. "I want you to be here. Always. You healed our home, Mara. One meal at a time. Now let me build the rest of it with you." Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, yes, Daniel." And just like that, the kitchen that had once echoed with grief and emptiness overflowed with joy. There was no longer just one place at the table for Mara. There was a permanent seat, carved into the fabric of their lives. It wasn't the life she had planned. It wasn't the one Daniel had envisioned. But it was whole, and it was theirs. Love didn't come loudly, but it came, in flavors and laughter, in shared silence, in casseroles and cinnamon rolls, in the messy, miraculous rebuilding of a family. And it all began with a meal.